Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here. I know we're still waiting on a few more folks, but we do have 4 items today. So I think in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. And as you can tell, because I'm up here, unfortunately, our chair could not make it today. So I'll be chairing our meeting. Welcome to our June 27th, 2024 Social Equity Working Group meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order at, should get a watch first, 9:32 a.m. Clerk, can you confirm that we have quorum, please? Yep. Just kidding. First, before we get started, I'd like to ask our interpreter to introduce themselves and walk through how to access interpretation services for today's meeting. Is our interpreter online?
Yes. Announcement from interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias. Clerk, now can we confirm that we have quorum?
Thank you. Yes, we do have a quorum for this meeting.
Thank you, Tessa. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territories and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most of any county in the United States. Our land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Now I will ask the clerk to review the meeting process for both working group members as well as members of the public who wish to participate.
If you are a member of the body, you can raise your hand when you'd like to speak and Paula will call on you. And for members of the public, if you're in person, please submit a speaker slip to me. And if you're online, raise your hand at the beginning of each item. And we will call on those in person first and then those virtually. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Tessa. And can you provide a quick reminder of how public comment works? Did you cover that? I'm sorry. Forgive me. Okay, do members of the working group have any questions on the meeting procedures before we continue? Thank you. We'll begin our meeting with item 1. Item 1 is member and public comments. Do we have any public comments for this item?
There are no public comments non-agenda for this item.
Thank you. Do working group members have any comments or questions on items that are not on today's agenda? Okay. I have a few updates I'd like to share, and maybe we'll start. I think, Rosa, this is your first meeting with us. Do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosa. I'm filling in for Jesse Ramirez that usually comes. I'm the Vice President of Community Development and Policy for City Heights CDC.
Thank you for being here, Rosa. Sorry to put you on the spot. And I have just a couple updates. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge and offer a warm welcome. He's not here, but to our new CEO, Mario Orso. He started here at SANDAG last Monday. We're looking forward to updating him on the progress of this group and how we're working to advance social equity in our region. Mario has a long history with SANDAG. Many of you likely know him. He's been with Caltrans and really involved in many of the projects that SANDAG is also working on. So I'm sure many of you know him, and hopefully we'll see him at one of our meetings or hear from him. But welcome to him. I'm also pleased to share that SANDAG worked with the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, and we hosted a tribal summit that brought together the SANDAG Board of Directors and tribal leaders earlier this month. The tribal summit is something that we've typically done every 4 years. It was a little off cycle. We hadn't done it in 6 years because of the pandemic. So we were really pleased to bring that back. We had more than 80 attendees, 40 folks around the dais, so our board members, tribal leaders, and they discussed, different ways that we can collaborate on regional policies and strengthening the existing government-to-government framework that we have. And then finally, over the last several months, the regional planning and data science teams have been testing the initial concept that was presented to this group for the regional plan at the beginning of the year. We shared, okay, here's this initial concept. You all have shared that information with your communities. Now all the work has been happening on the back end, and we expect that to come back to the board sometime in July to determine if that initial concept meets all the state and federal requirements. So as soon as we have that date and more information, of course, we'll share it out with this group, because that'll be a good kind of next touch point for regional plan status. Okay. We'll now proceed to approving agenda item number 2, which is the April 25th Social Equity Working Group minutes. Do members have any comments or questions about the April minutes?
And before you call for the vote, I just want to remind the members, you do not have to have been present at the meeting to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Tessa. May I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? I have a motion by Alix, thank you, and a second by, we'll take Marjana. I saw her hand first. Thank you, Belen. Any opposed? Please raise your hand. Thank you. That is unanimously approved. Okay, moving on to our next item, item number 3, to kick us off, Dr. Octavio Rodriguez Ferreira and Caroline Stevens from SANDAG are going to
Paula.
present an overview.
I apologize for interrupting, but we needed to call for public comments on the minutes, and I did not have any, just to state for the record.
Thank you, Tessa. I'll start over again. Dr. Octavio Rodriguez Ferreira and Caroline Stevens from SANDAG are going to present an overview on the Criminal Justice Research Division and ARGIS teams of the Data Science Department. And if you'll recall, this was a request. I believe it was one of our members who's not here, but this topic was requested by this group. So we're happy to bring it. Really, it's just an overview of this department and the work that they do here at SANDAG. So I will pass it over to Caroline and Octavio.
Great. Hi, good morning. My name is Caroline Stevens. I'm a senior research analyst with ARGIS, and I've worked for ARGIS in between ARGIS and CJ for about 9 years now. So I have a lot of expertise with the data that we're going to talk about today and the 2 departments that we're going to cover. With that, what is ARGIS? We are the Automated Regional Justice Information System, and we are actually a separate JPA within SANDAG. that serves as a complex criminal justice enterprise network used by more than 65 law enforcement agencies throughout the region, local, state, and federal. We're responsible for major public safety initiatives in the region, such as reporting all of our data to NIBRs and cybers, which I'm going to talk more about in a future slide. And we serve the region as basically the hub for law enforcement and criminal justice information. So I want to talk about our core functions and just give you some practical examples of what we do every day. First and foremost, we're a data sharing warehouse. So our local law enforcement agencies contribute all of their data to ARGIS so that they can see it from one another. And then we do that through a 24/7 secure network. We have 3 full-time professional network staff that maintain all of our circuits, make sure that all of our data is safe and secure, and then backed up at various locations in case any of our servers fail. We do all of the reporting for the region to the state and the federal government on what types of crime is happening in the region. We develop our own custom in-house software so that we can better organize and display the information that's coming into ARGIS to all of our officers and child services and all of our user organizations. We're an information exchange, so we have a SharePoint site where people from all throughout the region can share documents and updates on crime investigations that they're working on. It's just a place for them to talk and share information as well. We do a ton of data validation. So we accept the data in whatever format it comes to us. Almost every different agency has a different CAD system for taking in 911 calls and a different RMS, and the data can come to us in 16 different ways. So we look at the same data field and we standardize that and make sure that we can present it back to the people who are viewing the data in a way that makes sense. We have a very strong regional governance structure. We have a lot of oversight from SANDAG and a board that I'm going to talk about on another slide. And we do a ton of work on legislative compliance to make sure that everything that we're doing is within the bounds of federal and state laws. And we do a lot of policy development here. So every time we develop a new technology or buy a new technology, we write a comprehensive policy for how it's going to be used by officers in the field. And we bring that to the board here at SANDAG and they review it and okay it before we move forward with deploying that into the field in a major way. We provide a lot of public access to data. We do over 50 public records requests per year, and we provide data to the SANDAG Open Data Portal. And we have a lot of innovation in the space of just law enforcement data sharing, and we're a national model for how to do this successfully. I also want to highlight the things that we don't do, just to make that clear. So we don't provide any immigration enforcement information. All of our databases have been scrubbed of that information. That's not a core function for us, and that's not something that we want to do, information that we want to provide. And we don't do employment or background checks. That's not the purpose of ARGIS. Our purpose is for criminal investigations and crime statistics throughout the region. And yeah, we really want our members to focus on those core functions and not other functions. And we don't have any full-time investigators on our team. So our purpose is receiving the data, cleaning it, organizing it, and bringing it back to our clients. So with that, we do a ton of data sharing out and in. So our 11 local law enforcement agencies, and I'm actually going to flip to the next slide really quickly. We receive data from everybody from Carlsbad to Escondido, all the way down to Chula Vista. We receive also supervision cases from San Diego County Probation so that when officers arrest somebody, they can see if that person is already on probation and communicate with the probation officer as to where that person has gone. And then we receive information from the district attorney's office and also Sequan Tribal Police. We're just going to flip back to this. So we receive data and information in from our 11 local law enforcement agencies, San Diego County Probation, and also some information from the courts, some citations information. We have 9 different record types now, but the most important ones are crime reports, arrests, citations, and our officer notification records, which are kind of officer safety alerts, like if there's somebody who's absconded with a child, or if there's somebody who's armed and dangerous who the police are looking for, they'll create what's called an officer notification system record to maintain safety in the field. So those are our record types. And who that data goes to is obviously back to our local agencies, our federal agencies, our state agencies, and then we report it onward, all of the key statistics to Cal DOJ, and then they report it onward to US DOJ for us to make sure that both the state and the feds are getting all of our relevant crime data. We do a ton of records requests for different city departments, city planners, developers who need information on crime statistics in areas that they're developing in. We do a lot of media requests for the San Diego Union Tribune, the Voice of San Diego, a lot of different reporters. And then, of course, universities and students are some of our biggest clients as well. So a lot of times people are looking for like 8 years of crime data to do a longitudinal study, and we can provide really high quality anonymized data so that they can do research studies. And we think that's a really important function to be able to serve the community with. I just also want to go over our governance structure real quick because it's a little complicated. So in 2004, ARGIS was consolidated with SANDAG, and the JPA was modified to include the formation of the Public Safety Committee, replacing the ARGIS Board of Directors. Now we have representation from elected officials, law enforcement executives, emergency medical services, and Homeland Security officials. And at that committee, we talk about everything from crime statistics to fire reports to any of our new technologies that we might be working on. And we're governed by the PSC, but we also report out to the SANDAG Board of Directors. So anything new that we're doing that's big, they basically have to sign off on. And SANDAG is the only place where all of our jurisdictions, the 18 cities and county, can sit at the table and have a voice in decision-making for what we do. So we do feel like this is the right place for us to be in terms of getting that regional input and serving as a regional resource. And then we have working groups that report out to those committees. So our business working group is made up of mostly agency CLETS coordinators. Those are kind of the safekeeping people for the data within each police organization. And they review all the stuff that we're doing with our data and make sure that it's clear and coherent and also legal. And it's working on very kind of non-sexy items like how are records being sealed, and is that going out correctly to each agency, and are records being expunged in a timely manner and things like that. So we do a lot of just kind of nitty-gritty records management issues. We also have a cybers working group, which focuses on that data reporting that we're going to talk about more to the state and the feds. And then we have a technical working group that works more on like application development and software and things like that. So in terms of our key projects in 2024, right now we're really focused on just updating some of our interfaces because some of our circuits are pretty old. So we want to make sure that they're getting updated and that they're fast and efficient for all of our members who are using those. Cleaning and compiling the data and reporting it in a way that makes sense to the public, the state, and the feds. Right now, also, all of our data is on-prem in like physical servers here, and we're working on bringing it into a cloud environment that's safe and secure, just so that it's a better longitudinal plan for our members in terms of accessing the data in a way that makes sense. So taking us from SQL to Microsoft Azure and that environment, that's a big focus for us right now. And then we have 5,500 direct customers in the field. So we're taking help desk calls all day long for people who just need help logging in or have questions or don't know what they're looking at in our system, and they maybe need a little bit of help understanding it. And then, of course, we're really focused on bringing that data back to the public. So how can you access our data? It is on the SANDAG Open Data Portal. Back to 2021, we have really a great look at regional crime statistics right now. If you go to opendata.sandag.org, we're like the fourth square over, and it says Cybers Crime Data. And what that is going to show you is all crime cases and arrests that are reported to the state and the feds in our region from 2021, I believe, through March of 2024. So, and we update that quarterly, and all the data is refreshed. So any changes that occur to those crime cases, like let's say new charges come on or the DA decided not to charge on a case, that'll reflect in that data. So we highly recommend if you have questions about what's going on in your community or where you work and what those crime statistics look like, to visit our open data portal and get more information that way. And of course, we are always here to help any of your organizations with any needs that you have. We do a ton of work. I've already worked with some organizations that sit on this board in terms of public records requests. So we're always here to assist. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Octavio. And also, does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Hi, thank you for the information. I just have one question. If a community member needed to get a record expunge cleared, would they be able to use your software for a resource?
You would go to the owning agency of the record. So they will always have control over the record. We are data custodians. We receive the records and clean them. We don't change anything. We receive the record as is, but always work through your local law enforcement agency. And every agency that we work with has extremely dedicated staff on that particular issue. So yeah.
Rita?
Hi, thank you. I've used your website before in the past when I was working with preventing underage drinking and youth access to drugs and alcohol. So, but now that I work with the families, I'm wondering if I wanted that extensive crime report from, you were saying like from 8 to 8 years in our neighborhoods with our families in the South Bay.
Mhm.
How long, okay, so how detailed can I get? And how long is the process?
Sure. So for most of our record types, we retain 7 years of information. And you would log a public records request with us, and pretty much I can get you everything except for PII. So personally identifying information, just because that's protected by different California laws and CLETs. And of course, we want to protect victims' rights as well as the rights of juveniles and suspect privacy as well. So, but what we can do is provide you with anonymized records. So, for example, if there's, a suspect that occurs 3 different times on 3 different records, I can create a number to represent that person. And that way you can see the pattern in the data still. But we have everything from offenders to suspects to location information, stolen property, all the charges on the case, of course, the case disposition. Really anything you can think of, we probably have. So there's a lot of detail in our data. So I always encourage people when they're doing public records requests through us to just ask for this guy and I'll tell you what we have. Yeah, and it's kind of a back and forth process. And typically from start to completion, it takes us about a month.
Mhm.
And if there's some very intense SQL programming that needs to go on, sometimes there's a charge associated. But typically when I'm working with a university or a bigger organization, it's not a big cost for them. I think the most expensive one I've ever done was $200. So.
Okay, and then say, because some of our families are homeless and we've been hearing a lot that they're sleeping in their cars. They were robbed while they're sleeping in their cars. And so I want to really show that our families are being attacked and violent crimes against them. And we're hearing more of the families going through this. So can I request that kind of information?
Absolutely, yes. So we would have the type of, basically the type of entry that was forced and whether it was a home or a vehicle or a garage or a commercial location. We have all that information. And then we also have an indicator for whether or not the person, there's a checkbox that the officers can check in the field saying whether the person is homeless or not. So we have pretty good information. We're still looking on improving some of our information in our systems around the unhoused population and those who are urban camping and getting that properly documented. Again, those are regional discussions, so making sure that everybody's logging the information in the same way and that we're receiving it and cleaning it in a way that's standard is really important to us. But we expect to see good improvement on that too over the next 2 to 3 years. It's an area that we focus on right now.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mani?
Thank you for the presentation. My question is, do you have the authority or the capacity to make proactive recommendations? For example, we see crime hotspots in the area. We're going to make that known to the local law enforcement agency.
So that's not technically our role. We more provide the data back to the analysis departments within the police agencies. And then the LACC, of course, does a lot of analysis for the region as well. And I would say really more like the sheriff's department handles a ton of regional analysis in that way. But what we do is we provide them with really solid tools to be able to view their crime statistics and understand it in a clear and dynamic and visual format. And we take that lift off of the kind of agency IT departments. We kind of free them up to do other work so that we can, you know, present the information the best way possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then you mentioned that part of the data includes supervision in collaboration with probation. Does it include juveniles? And do you have data on when juveniles violate their terms, terms of probation, and what terms
don't
they?
think we're receiving any juvenile probation information right now. And I think we started with just adults because we weren't sure exactly like what to do with juvenile information and it's so sensitive because a lot of juveniles are not on a traditional supervision, right? They're in a diversion program and they might be their case might be being handled in PCMS, which is probation's data keeping system, but it's not like an adult who's, you know, committed several felonies, something like that. It's very different information. So as of right now, I don't think we have any of that information, but I can double check that for you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other comments for now? And we will have additional time after. Octavio? Okay, we'll pass it.
Thank you very much, members of the working group. SANDAG is a very unique planning organization because of the important work we do in criminal justice. You just heard about the amazing job that Argis and Caroline do. And now I'm going to talk about what I do on the Criminal Justice Research Division. This division started many, many years ago, many decades ago, actually. Can you help me with, there you go. With two main intentions. One, to serve as the criminal justice and public safety clearinghouse for the region, and to help independent organizations or other branches of government to assess some of their programming that relates to public safety and criminal justice. Through our clearinghouse, criminal justice clearinghouse, we do pretty much take all the data that Argis compiles and we produce in-depth analysis of those data and publish it so the public can access it, but also it serves for so law enforcement and decision makers to shape policy or at least help them in their decision-making process. Some of the most important analysis, every year we do a yearly crime bulletin, which is going to be released soon, next month, which it's the one, as you can see in this chart, is the one that draws more attention. This chart indicates all the media mentions that we had in 2023. And as you can see, the crime bulletin is the most important one. Then we had on the rest bulletin focusing on law enforcement responses to crime in the region. And the way we measure that is to know more and do analysis on all the arrests that occurred in a given year in every jurisdiction in the San Diego region. We have other crimes that are, other reports that are not included here, but we do analysis on gun crime, hate crime, victims and suspects, on public safety expenditures and others. So every year we produce the same type of report. So this information can be updated, and it serves some sort of a staple. So law enforcement, as I mentioned, and the media and the public can keep informed and just be learning every year on how the region's doing in terms of crime and public safety. But besides getting that information from SANDAG, from ARGIS, we do generate our own data. And in the 80s, there was a project that was funded by the National Institute of Justice that wanted to see patterns of drug use within local jails. So they started funding this program, and San Diego, through SANDAG, started doing this analysis back then. That program was closed later on from the federal government, but SANDAG secured funds to continue doing this important work. And we have been doing this uninterruptedly for more than 30 years. This report or this study helps us to understand and to really see how patterns of drug use change within local arrestees in local jails as some sort of indicator of what's going on in the broader society. This report covers, this analysis covers adults, males and females, and juveniles, males and females. And it is a series of interviews, completely anonymous and voluntary, followed by a voluntary drug test. The participants can agree or disagree to participate in drug testing. Most of the time, we have a pretty high ratio, high rate, I'm sorry, of people accepting or willing to take those tests. And so this can really help us to understand and tie some of the questions about drug use with actual results of positives. And we know like positives on many different drugs. And with that, we can start, measuring, as I mentioned, some sort of a small laboratory of what's going in our society as a whole. And here is just some sample results from our 2023 analysis, which is the latest one. We are still in the final stages of the publication of the report, and that's going to also come next month, and it's going to be available on our website. Besides that, SANDAG committed to bring $1 for every $4 that we receive through our clearinghouse funds to perform independent evaluation of programs that relate to public safety and criminal justice. And those are programs from other agencies in the region and also from community organizations. And so we help them to understand their data and know how their programs are performing. And of course, all of these programs have to do and have to be related with criminal justice and public safety. And here's just a quick example of some of the current programs that we have that we're the independent evaluator of. We have a program with Chula Vista Police Department on interactions and equity and transparency under the RIPA project, the racial. I completely blanked on the acronym. I'm sorry. It will come back later. We have a report with the county on Prop 47 and trying to, this program tries to provide tools for people that are exiting custody so they can come back to society with housing tools, but also leadership and other important skills that will help them when they go back to society. We have federal funds from the Project Safe Neighborhoods program on gun violence. And we're also starting a new project with Chula Vista Police Department to analyze or evaluate a program that they have to reduce retail theft. And on the juvenile side, we are the independent evaluator of the JJCPA program. That's a juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act. And so these, for those who don't know, this piece of legislation, what we wanted to do is switch the focus of the criminal justice from incarceration to alternative measures. So juveniles are not going to the criminal justice system, the traditional criminal justice system, and rather provide with other tools and other mechanisms for their probably to prevent crime and of course avoid recidivism. So with this, we gather information on participants of the different diversion programs. We see how they do program-wise during their participation, but also we do recidivism analysis. We know if they went back to the criminal justice system, and therefore we know whether these programs were or how effective they were, depending on the rate of recidivism. We work with many community organizations such as SBCS to evaluate some programs on crime prevention as well. We work with police departments to evaluate programs on cannabis, illegal cannabis distribution, and also cannabis education for families and youth, and also other diversion initiatives or independent diversion initiatives, such as the one from the district attorneys, the Juvenile Diversion Initiative. And besides that, Caroline mentioned the Public Safety Committee, which is our governing body. The Criminal Justice Research Division staffs that committee, and that committee serves to, as Caroline mentioned, to approve or discuss important improvements in the work we do, but also to discuss important items that are happening. The committee was the last meeting was last week, and we had a really interesting conversation about prevention, emergency prevention and response from fire departments in different cities and some of the innovations that they're implementing, which was really interesting. And we have other topics to discuss, for example, a recent transition to a new federal crime reporting system that has caused a lot of doubts and questions. And so this is a good forum for us to discuss these topics and understand a little more about it. And our research is very important and it's very useful. As I mentioned, is the main source of information on criminal justice and public safety in the region. We do offer that in-depth analysis to statistics that could otherwise be available, but we add that extra part of having that historical knowledge and having that historical data and do analysis so we can compare and see how trends are going in the last 40 years. But we also can help programs that intend to improve the criminal justice system to see whether they're reaching the impact they want, whether they are performing the way they expect, and providing tools and mechanisms for them to improve those programs. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present our work.
Thank you both. Do we have other comments from members of our working group or questions? Okay.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one is, I think I caught the gist, but could you elaborate on how you select your projects? Is it the agencies that ask you to do them, or just what's the process?
So most of the times those evaluation projects are, we have that knowledge and that expertise. And whenever an agency, let's say the county probation is developing a new program, they reach out to us and invite us to participate in that because we have that access to criminal justice information. My division has a requisite. Nobody can work in my division if it's not background checked. So we can have access to these type of information, these type of records. And so some of the times it's directly like that. We partner with the organization in developing that work. Some other times it's a public competition. So we present a proposal and we are selected. And sometimes it's grant-based. We submit grants to do specific work, and that's how it's related. So it's always, it varies the way we do it, but those are the three main ways we can get new projects.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then my second question, you mentioned JJCPA and JDI and all these county programs. I'm interested in finding data on cool beds, which gives, it's like an alternative to detention, right? And so if I have a specific request like that, how do I find it? Is it through the website, through contacting you through email?
So the good thing about most of the clearinghouse information that we produce it's there, it's public, and everybody can access. But some of the evaluations that we do are also public, specifically for JJCPA. We do have those reports available in our website, so everybody can just go ahead and download the reports. We produce reports every year, and there you can see the performance, or the breakdown of each of the diversion programs that are part of this initiative. And you can see that, and you can see the number of participants that they had and some of the recidivism outcomes as well. But I'm happy to provide that information to you, and if you need it.
Thank you. I'll contact you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for this information. Kind of similar question. As far as the substance use data, is that also publicly available?
That is correct. Yeah, that is publicly available. We do not make available the raw data, the survey data as a whole, but we do have our analysis of those numbers, and so every year we publish that in a bulletin, and that bulletin is available in our website, but also through the open data portal. We started to make those data available as well, providing a little more room for interaction for the user, and kind of custom make their own analysis. We don't have this year's information up there yet. As I mentioned, we are about to publish the adult bulletin next month, but we published our juvenile analysis for this year. That's already available on their website. And also some other publications that intend to highlight important points of what we found on a given year.
Regina. Thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. First, all the bulletins that you're producing, is it county-wide? Is it region-specific? And then the second one is, you mentioned that SANDAG works on cannabis education for youth. Is that correct? And so I wanted to hear a little bit more about that, because that's the first I've heard of it.
Yes, I'm happy to clarify that. So through our clearinghouse functions, we do regional analysis. So we include all jurisdictions in the San Diego region. So you can see that. You can see statistics from Harbor Police, from the public universities, of course, public safety related information of public universities. So everything is region-wide. We don't do like specific city by city or jurisdiction by jurisdiction analysis. We just put that, but you do find information specific to each jurisdiction in our tables within the report. And regarding your second question, SANDAG is the evaluator of a program from law enforcement, and law enforcement provides this education to juveniles and to youth and family on cannabis education. And so we serve as the evaluator of that program. We reach out to participants and try to gauge their satisfaction, their learning, and some of the things that can be improved or are working well within those education programs.
No other comments, questions from members of our working group?
I just wanted to follow up on that question. I did text my technical team, and we indeed are only receiving adult probation cases, not children's cases. So Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline.
Sorry, so now I have a follow-up question to that. Because you guys are taking JDI cases that could be on probation, and with JJCPA, I'm assuming that's alternatives to detention and diversion programs that are through probation. So you are taking those cases.
So their data collection is separate from our data
Okay.
collection.
Okay.
They have very separate access from us on their youth projects. Just to be able to evaluate that in a more holistic way, we do
Okay.
not receive that information because we have two different client bases, right? So they're serving probation as an evaluator, and we are serving law enforcement and public safety as a data provider. So yeah, so they have it, we don't.
Got it. Understood. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, and if I can just add something, sometimes it's very confusing because we handle almost the same information, of very similar information, but we are two separate entities. As Caroline mentioned, there are the custodians of some of the adult criminal justice data, but us, of course, we take most of that data for analysis, but for evaluation projects, we have other mechanisms to access that information. We have access to other databases from probation, district attorneys, etc. And so we can access that to see specific information by individual, and then we analyze it. And of course, we provide aggregated information, making sure that we protect the identity, of course, of the participants of a specific program. So we don't publish any personal information, and not even disaggregated data on specific individuals. We do it more on an aggregated level and just analyzing programs as a whole. And
I promise this is my last one. But that brought up another question. Does that mean that, so these alternative to detention programs, at the end of it, the case might be closed or the record might be sealed? Do you get that information then, and then do you maintain those records, or then do you have to destroy those records on your end?
We do not have that information. We access that information directly from the databases, and what we collect is completely de-identified information, and we do have access because one of the points, or one of the main tools that we use to measure the relevance and performance of programs is recidivism. And so to see if a participant of a given program has had contact with the criminal justice system again in 6 months, 12 months, 36 months, it's important for us to have access to that information. But we do not own that information. We access that information from other agencies, and the information we collect, we also have a period that we can keep our records, and then our records are destroyed as well. Yeah.
And for us, how that handles is the record completely flows out of our system. So let's say it's an adult record and it's sealed as well. It would basically, all the PII comes off the record, and it just reflects, now the person named just reflects as sealed. And so the statistic is still there if we wanted to report on like how many arrests in that year or something. But the person's information is gone, and it flows into a separate locked up, sealed database that the agency handles. So it's no longer regional information.
And just
Okay.
Before I completely forgot about the RIP acronym earlier, and that's a Racial Identity Profiling Act. So we do work on racial profiling by law enforcement agencies. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. We do have 3 other presentations. So in the interest of time, I think we'll keep moving, and both Caroline and Octavio are available if folks have questions that you want to check in with them after the fact. Thank you. Tessa, do we have public comments on this item?
Thank you. There are no public comments.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the San Diego Regional Zero Emissions Vehicle Incentive Program. Samaya Elder and Susan Friedman from SANDAG are here to share an update with us today. Hi again, Samaya.
Hi, Paula. Hello, everyone. Glad to be with you here today. My name is Samaya Elder. I'm an associate regional planner on our climate team here in the planning department at SANDAG. I was last with this group in February of this year, where I invited you all to participate in a series of focus groups where we asked you about the design and barriers to zero-emission vehicle access to help inform the structure of this regional zero-emission vehicle incentive program that we've been working on. And one of the asks out of those focus groups was that we come back and share out on how that information was used and what we heard. So that's part of why I'm here today. So getting started with just a project overview, this is something that I've shared before, so I'll just touch on it briefly, but there are two main priorities for this program. One is to provide EV rebates for low and moderate income households, and the second is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And this program is actually a greenhouse gas reduction measure in our 2021 regional plan. It's also going to be for new and used passenger vehicles. So those are vehicles like cars, pickup trucks, vans, et cetera. And the planned program opening is next year in 2025. And then I'll touch on this again towards the end of the presentation, but just as a heads up, we did apply for funding from the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, for this program. So starting with what we've learned so far, kind of where we've been, the work done to date. The first step in our process was the existing conditions assessment. This is something where we conducted research and analyzed EV policies and market trends, and we also held a series of interviews with the administrators or managers of other incentive programs to learn about best practices, and we learned a lot. The full list is on the screen, and the report is available online in case you're interested in learning more. But the main thing I want to call out is the fact that disparities in zero-emission vehicle adoption remain in the region. This map on the right shows the concentration of zero-emission vehicle, or ZEV, ownership in the region, and those are the darker green areas. And then the dotted I think that's purple and red areas are where we have Kaalmada screen disadvantaged communities. And you can see there's very little overlap with where the highest socioeconomic and pollution burden is in these disadvantaged communities, and where these cleaner air vehicles are being owned and operated. Moving on to kind of our broader community and stakeholder engagement efforts, we held a total of 5 focus groups in March of this year. So 3 were those that we invited you to, and those were for CBOs. We also held 2 focus groups with community members, and we heard a lot of kind of similar thoughts around barriers to EV ownership and preferences for how the program should be designed. So by far, the biggest barrier that we heard is limited access to charging. And we are very aware here at SANDAG that that is something that remains an issue, especially in disadvantaged communities throughout the region. So that's something that we're working on kind of in parallel to developing this program, is how can we both think about ZEV ownership, but also acknowledge and work to dismantle or resolve the barriers that exist to owning these types of vehicles. We also heard a lot about costs, so cost of ownership, upfront costs, monthly payments, and lack of experience with EVs or communities that typically don't buy new cars in general. In terms of program preferences, size of incentive was the most important factor, so wanting the biggest discount possible to try and really make an impact to close that gap towards the price of a vehicle, which I'll touch on more in just a bit. We also heard about wanting an upfront point of sale discount rather than a rebate after the fact, where you have to put up the full upfront cost yourself. We also heard again about including used vehicles and providing technical assistance, using a simple, clear, easy to use application, and being very mindful of language accessibility so that the program can actually be successfully used. Focusing just for a second on the CBO focus groups, first of all, a major thank you to everyone who participated. I think we had representation from almost every group that's part of this social equity working group, so thank you so much. And I really hope that today's presentation kind of helps demonstrate why your feedback was so important and crucial for us in this program development process. And if you're interested in learning more about what was said specifically in the CBO focus groups, staff has actually prepared a summary report, which is available in the meeting agenda packet.
And then just to elaborate on a couple of other things that we heard specific to the CBO focus groups, in addition to the barriers and program preferences that I just mentioned, participants stated that they mainly received info on incentive programs through community organizations and personal connections. We also heard a lot about sharing program information through community events and social media to reach the public. And there was also an interest in low interest financing for ZEBs, which is something that staff will be looking into. So to wrap up kind of where we've been and where we are in the process, I just went over the first two boxes at the top here. So researching and doing an existing conditions assessment about other types of programs in the current car buying environment. I also went over our feedback from all of you and other CBOs and the public. And we're now in the design phase, which we're actually wrapping up with our program strategy. Next, we'll be planning all the details to make the program a reality and bring it to life to launch the ZEV program next year. So with that, I will be going into a couple of the draft program strategy components. So a little bit more detail on where we are right now and how your feedback and input and the research that we've done has really shaped the program. So starting with the recommended incentive type and structure, we heard again in the focus groups that the point of sale voucher format or discount at the point of sale was by far the most preferred by CBOs and community members. I will add that this is more costly to administer and operate as a program, so that's something that we'll be looking at more closely and balancing as we move towards implementation. The program will also be for residents of low-income and disadvantaged communities, or LIDACs for short, so an equity-focused program. And we're looking at using an application and pre-approval process where someone would apply for approval to use the program ahead of time and then bring a voucher or an approval letter of some sort to a car dealership or seller to use for their purchase or lease of a ZEV. As far as vehicles that would be eligible for the program, we are planning to include both all-electric or entirely electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Because all-electric vehicles are both more expensive but also have greater air quality benefits, we're looking at including a greater incentive amount for those vehicles. As I mentioned, we'll also be including new and used vehicles, and we'd be setting an MSRP cap for new vehicles and a sale price cap for used vehicles. Okay, so this next slide is for illustrative purposes only and is really to transition us from talking about vehicle eligibility to applicant eligibility and how those are kind of interrelated. So the graph here is intended to show the gap between how much people could, in theory, spend on a vehicle compared to the cost of a used or new zero-emission vehicle. So really, this graph is based on modeling and database assumptions, and we know that in reality, it will vary significantly between neighborhoods and individual households, but for the purpose of illustrating kind of the gap that exists, on the horizontal bars, we have different income levels. So at the top, there's 400% federal poverty level, and federal poverty level, or FPL, is the metric that we plan to use for the program. And that descends down to 100% FPL at the bottom. And then the red line towards the middle is showing the average used zero-emission vehicle price around $30K. And the red line at the far right is the average price of a new zero-emission vehicle around $63.5K. So really, I mean, you can see how significant the gap is between even the average, right? So not even acknowledging the spectrum of different models and trims that exist in these types of vehicles, but even just the average price of a used ZEV, there's a significant gap for households at the 300 and 200% FPL levels. And so with that, moving on to applicant eligibility criteria, as I mentioned, the program would be for residents located in a LIDAC designated census tract, so geographic-based criteria, or for residents with an annual household income at or below 400% FPL. So we've included the chart below to show the kind of the comparison between FPL and area median income, or AMI. And you can see on the far right, looking at a household size of 3, which is the regional average for the San Diego region, 400% FPL is a little bit over $100,000 per year in annual income. And you can see that that's comparable to kind of in between 80% AMI and median income. And then we would be, based on the previous slide, and how significant the gaps are, we're looking at having a higher rebate or an adder to the incentive amount for households at or below 300% FPL. So that wraps up kind of the key components of the program as it's currently designed. So our next steps are to finalize that design in the ZEV Incentive Program Strategy. That report would be available later this summer on the SANDAG website. After that, we'll be developing a program implementation plan, which is where we start to get into the details and the nitty-gritty of how are we actually going to launch and operate this program. As I mentioned in the very beginning too, staff applied for funding from the EPA to fund this program, and we're expecting to hear back this summer on whether or not we're awarded. And then another ask that came out of the focus groups and other recent presentations is that staff share more local resources and updates on incentive programs. So we've linked two here to the slide that SANDAG is aware of in the region. The first of is the Air Pollution Control District's Clean Cars for All program. That is a scrap and replace vehicle program for low-income households. And then the second is SDG&E's pre-owned EV rebate program. That is a used EV rebate program. So you purchase the vehicle and get a post-purchase rebate, and it's for all SDG&E residential customers. And there is a higher rebate for low-income customers as well. And then the very last thing I wanted to touch on is, this project and all of SANDAG ZEV work really is part of our larger climate team's mission to improve air quality and sustainability in the region. So in line with that, we'll be hosting a climate table workshop later this summer. We'll be talking about all things ZEVs and then many more climate action topics as well. And we'd love for you all to attend. So if that sounds interesting to you, keep an eye out for more details to come. And I'm happy to take any questions about the Climate Table Workshop and the ZEV program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Samaya. Do members of the working group have any comments or questions for Samaya? Alex.
Thanks, Samaya. I'm just curious, why use the federal poverty line versus something more relative to the region?
So we have a technical team that's working with us, and they've done a lot of modeling based on what other programs are using. And the best way for us to be stackable with other types of incentive programs, actually, if you don't mind, I'll go back to that slide really quick. This one, you can see how significant the gap is. And we see SANDAG's program being something that can be stacked with other programs locally, statewide, and federally to help close the gap, because it'll be very difficult for any one program to provide, for example, $15,000 per person to really get us all the way there. So essentially, the FPL criteria is what other programs use, and we want to be able to make sure that if you apply for our program, you're not above the applicant eligibility for some other program. So it helps the end user to be eligible for more things if we're kind of at the same level.
And then I have another one. So you'll be having two different caps for a used ZEV and a new ZEV. Since they're closer to a used ZEV vehicle, is it going to be higher for a used car?
Yeah, so really the purpose of the caps is just to ensure that this program is not being used for the purchase of like high-end luxury vehicles. So that's why we have the sale caps right now. Sorry, can you clarify the?
I guess because you haven't figured out how much you're going to give an applicant. The amounts that they're going to be giving to purchase a ZEV is going to be different for a used versus a new vehicle, right?
That's something that we'll be looking at in more detail in the implementation plan.
Okay.
Yeah. So the incentive amounts are not set yet, and there's a lot of ways to like slice and dice that, whether it's based on your income level and location, or the type of vehicle that you want to purchase, hybrid or all electric, or if it's new or used. So the incentive amount will vary, though, I think is what you're asking.
Yeah, but my question is it going to be, are we going to incentivize more used ZEV versus new ZEV? Since 300 and 200 are much closer to the used line versus the new line. Does that make sense? So it's more and more attainable.
Yeah, like will there be a greater incentive?
Yeah.
I'm not sure because another factor is the availability of used ZEVs in the region, and it is a smaller market than the new zero emission vehicle market, but it's growing rapidly right now, actually. So that's something to monitor, and I'll make a note of that because that's a good point.
Okay, thanks.
Did I see a hand on this side? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. This is a really interesting presentation. I agree with the recommendation that vouchers and offering discounts at the point of sale is the best way to increase access. I was wondering, does this involve public-private partnerships, or what does this look like?
That's another great point for the incentive program and something that we're looking into. I know that we definitely want to start doing outreach and developing partnerships with car dealerships and other kind of industry side folks in the region because it will take their buy-in for the program to be successful, especially if it is a point of sale voucher type of program. So we're not quite there yet, but that's something that we're starting to do this summer.
Thank you. Yes, and I just want to echo, I think, what my colleague here was saying about being careful with the caps, right? Like, we definitely don't want them purchasing a luxury vehicle and claiming the rebate if they don't need it. But I think that's also ruled out by the income requirements. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comments on this item, Tessa?
Thank you. There are no public comments.
Great. Thanks, Amaya. Okay, we'll now move on to item 5. We'll have an overview of the Smart Growth Incentive Program Cycle 6 Call for Projects from Jenny Russo and Stacy Cooper. My apologies, from Stacy Cooper and Goldie Herban. Welcome, Goldie and Stacy.
Thanks, Paula. Hi, working group members. My name is Goldie Herban. I'm a senior grants program analyst on the grants team here at SANDAG, and I'm also the program manager of the Smart Growth Incentive Program. I'm here today with Stacy Cooper. She's a senior regional planner, and we'll be presenting the Smart Growth Incentive Program Cycle 6 Call for Projects. And at the end of the presentation, we'll be soliciting any feedback with regard to the evaluation criteria for this program. So there are 4 agenda items on deck today. First, I'll be providing a general programmatic overview, and then Stacy will dive into updates on Cycle 6, and then I'll go over the proposed evaluation criteria, and then we'll close it out with an open discussion about our evaluation criteria proposed. So the Smart Growth Incentive Program is a competitive grant program. It's funded exclusively through the Transnet Ordinance, and it provides funding for infrastructure improvements that support smart growth. And you may be wondering, what is smart growth? It's urban development. It's an urban development pattern that creates compact, higher density development that promotes greater transportation and housing choices. The Smart Growth Incentive Program specifically funds public infrastructure projects and planning activities that assist local agencies in better integrating land use and transportation. Local agencies include the 18 municipalities in the region and the County of San Diego. There have been 5 Smart Growth Incentive Program cycles to date. The first one was in 2009, and the last one was in 2022, Cycle 5. On the left side, the bar chart indicates the amount of awards to projects for each cycle. And if you look on the right side, the pie chart shows you where funding to date has been awarded. And it's been predominantly for capital construction projects. About 75% has gone to capital projects at $47 million, and 25% for planning projects at $12.6 million. So to date, there have been more than 70 planning and capital projects awarded through the Smart Growth Incentive Program. And these projects can be found throughout 12 cities throughout the county, and County of San Diego projects have been awarded as well. The program has also been able to leverage an additional $47 million through other funding, representing a total investment of $100 million in the region since the inception of the program. The images on the slide are of 4 projects that have been completed in the last few years, from Chula Vista on the upper left. On the right, San Marcos's project. Bottom left is Lemon Grove's Trolley Plaza, and the bottom right is the City of San Diego's downtown wayfinding signage project, which can be found in Little Italy. While not depicted here, the types of planning projects that we've funded include mixed use and commercial corridor plans and complete street design manuals, among others. Now Stacey's going to talk about Cycle 6 updates.
Good morning, everyone. Stacy Cooper, Senior Planner on the Sustainable Communities team. So for the next cycle of SCIP, we have $35 million available. We've been talking to the local jurisdictions through workshops and working groups to kind of get their ideas on, do they have the staff capacity to apply? What are their project priorities? What are the barriers? What are the opportunities? And is there anything we could change about the application process to streamline it and make it easier for them to apply? The biggest challenges that we've heard so far is staff capacity, and they've asked for more one-on-one consultation with SANDAG staff and some technical assistance when putting together their applications. Some of the project priorities that we keep hearing about are streetscape improvements, traffic calming projects, additional staff to support projects, ped and bike improvement projects, and planning studies related to accelerating housing development. So as Goldie mentioned, SCIP is a competitive grant program for the local jurisdictions funded through Transnet. So the local jurisdictions are the only eligible applicants for this program. That being said, they can partner with CBOs and nonprofits in the San Diego region on these projects. So in previous cycles, the area had to be in or include a smart growth opportunity area, and we're removing that constraint this year. The project still must advance multimodal transportation, better integrate transportation and land use, demonstrate meaningful reductions to VMT and GHG, advance equity, and align with the 2021 Regional Plan and Sustainability Strategy. So this year we'll have 3 categories: climate action planning, and capital. Climate action planning includes preparing or updating CAPs and GHG reduction plans that keep pace with state targets and the goals for GHG emission reductions. Planning includes plans and processes that accelerate smart growth activities, but they won't directly result in the construction of a public improvement project. Capital projects will eventually result in the construction of a public improvement. This includes projects like updating housing supportive infrastructure, bike and ped infrastructure enhancements, traffic calming infrastructure, and it also includes projects that are applicable under current caps with the local jurisdictions. So what we're proposing for this cycle is we will be putting $7 million towards planning, $3 million towards climate action planning, and $25 million towards capital. And the minimum and maximums are listed on the screen as well. One of the things that we have heard from the local jurisdictions is they would like the ability to apply for more than one project. In saying that, we will consider, as we have in the past, like geographic equity, that we will fund a project that is eligible from each jurisdiction before giving a second one to the same jurisdiction. And our anticipated timeline. So as we mentioned, we've been talking with the local jurisdictions. We had a kickoff event with them in November. We've been to Mobility and the Sustainable Communities Working Group. We're here today to hear your feedback on our criteria. We'll be moving on to ITALC, RPC, and TC and the Board of Directors for approval on the call for projects. We'll be releasing the call in November. The applications will be due in about March, and then after our evaluation period, we'll bring those funding recommendations back to ITALC, TC, RPC, and the board. And we expect the grant agreements to go out next October. And depending on whether it's a capital or a planning project, those will close out in 2028 to 2029. And I will pass it back to Goldie to talk about the draft evaluation criteria.
Great, thank you. All right, so as part of the Cycle 6 call for projects, we have updated our evaluation criteria, and these have been updated largely to better align with the goals of the program and to refine the criteria to ensure that the 2021 regional plan and its associated environmental impact report, or EIR, is reflected throughout. So like Stacey mentioned, we have 3 pots of funding available: planning, capital, and climate action planning. And the first 2 pots are, their evaluation criteria are listed here. So the draft evaluation criteria are consistent with previous cycles of Smart Growth Incentive Program. They're consistent with the transit ordinance, and they also encompass transportation committee and audit recommendations. So under each category here, you can see that the evaluation criteria are numbered 1 through 6, and there are sub-criterion associated with each criteria under the number. I just want to point out that they're largely the same. The nuance is that some weighting is different because the nature of a planning project versus a capital construction project. And I also want to point out that under capital, there's an additional sub-criterion under project feasibility, and that's major milestones completed. And we added this so that evaluators or scorers can better assess the project in terms of its constructability. And what does that mean? That means how far along is the construction project? Is design done, or is it 10%, or is it 90%? Are environmental clearances completed? Is permitting required? Have they secured permits, rights of way, things like that? So I want to go down each of these 6 criteria quickly if I can. The first one is relationship to regional transit. This will measure a project on their ability, or sorry, their portion of the project that's located within a mobility hub or transportation investment area. This is a similar criteria from past Smart Growth Incentive Program cycles. Number 2 is furthering regional plan and sustainable communities implementation strategies. So we're adding this element related to sustainable community strategies, but the regional plan component will be similar to past rounds. The third criteria is smart growth policy implementation. So this relates to key tenets of smart growth, and that includes land use, urban design, mobility, sustainability, and resilience. The next one is project readiness. So a project will be evaluated across project readiness related to how the project is able to provide its feasibility and efficient use of program funds. And just note that there's an additional sub-criterion for if it's a capital project. For board policy 33, this sub-criterion is 25% of the points. It requires the Smart Growth Incentive Program to ensure that cities that are awarded funding have compliant housing elements and demonstrate pro-housing policies. And then lastly, the matching fund criteria. While match funds are not required as part of this grant program, you are able to receive additional points if you provide in-kind resources or other funding mechanisms. And the last evaluation criteria table is for climate action planning. So recall this bucket of funding will support any new climate action plans or updates to existing climate action plans or greenhouse gas reduction plans. This evaluation criteria table is similar for criteria 3, 4, and 5, but we added 1 and 2 to reflect the requirements of climate action plans as noted in the environmental impact report of the 2021 regional plan. So you'll note that board policy 33 is listed 3 times in each funding pot, and that's because the board adopted board policy 33, and it must be implemented across all of our grant programs, including smart growth. And it requires that 25% of the points in a scoring criteria be allocated to this. And it's a 2-parter here, and it's listed in 1 and 2. A project must demonstrate pro-housing policies, and they must also ensure housing equity and that they affirmatively further fair housing if they want to secure the points associated with this criteria. So now just shifting gears a bit. So we talked about evaluation criteria, but now I want to talk about recommendations coming from our triennial audit. So every 3 years, there's a performance audit performed on Transnet ordinance funded programs, and the latest one was completed in the beginning of this year. And this slide illustrates the recommendations that came out of that report. Many of them are administrative, so we'll be implementing resolutions to these recommendations internally on our grants team, but there are 2 that I want to point out. The first one is the performance measures on the upper left. So we have to better integrate performance measures in our grant projects, and we hope to mirror a similar process that we did for our housing program, where we'll provide a menu of performance measures or metrics to our grantees, and they can select the most appropriate performance metrics, and they'll be reporting the progress of achieving those metrics either in the form of a quarterly report or a final report. And the other thing that will impact jurisdictions more is that recommendation out of the audit was that more detailed scopes of work are required. So in the past, we've created these templates that are for schedule scopes and budgets, and they're very high level in nature. But what we want to see is more defined project objectives and goals and integrating that into a grant agreement so that at the end of a project, we can say, hey, this project delivered exactly what they said in the agreement, and they delivered the project that they said that they competed with. So, you know, putting their money where their mouth is, basically. So that's the most important part, I think, that you can glean from the triennial recommendations. And then moving next, this is my last slide. It's related to requested changes to our process coming from the Transportation Committee. So there are 4 main points. They want more detailed scoring rubrics to come out of this cycle 6, meaning in the evaluation criteria, they want to see more kind of teased out definitions of what we want to see in an application so that we can better score them. So we'll show the nuance or the range of scoring and what we what we require, what we would like to see in a response from an applicant so they can see how many points they can get for a specific criteria. The Transportation Committee is also requesting evaluator consensus, and how we're going to address that is that we're going to have mandatory evaluator training. So whoever's on the selection committee or scoring committee will have a mandatory training so that they are well-versed in what their roles and responsibilities are. And we will hold consensus meetings so that if there's some discrepancy in scoring, we can hammer those out in those consensus building meetings. We're also moving away at the request of the Transportation Committee from average scoring because that caused a lot of confusion in the past. And so we'll be averaging out scores across all evaluators for projects. And then the last recommendation from the Transportation Committee is to have geographic funding distribution. So we'll distribute funding geographically, or at least limit the number of awards to a single applicant so that smart growth incentive benefits can be felt throughout the region and not just clustered in one geographic area. And that is my last slide. Here's some contact information if you have follow-up questions, if we don't answer them here, but I'm going to open up the floor for any.
And the draft criteria in the attachment, if you want to take a look and make any comments.
And did I hear you say you wanted some specific feedback, maybe something for the group to consider? Is there a question?
If anybody has any feedback on the criteria, we're open to it.
Alix.
Thank you, both of you. This is very exciting. I'm super excited. Regarding the criteria, relationship to regional transit, can you explain that a bit more? Is it proximity, like the closer you are to a regional transit hub?
As we are looking at it today, it would be the project is located in a mobility hub or a transit priority area.
So it's more proximity then versus really, yeah. I guess this is not about the criteria. Okay. How many projects do you guys think you'll be able to implement?
So can you go to the slide with the max mins? It's really going to depend on what we get in terms of applications and what they put in as their max and min. So the 3 million maximum for capital, with the 25 million, we could fund 8 projects about, you know, so it's really going to depend on what the jurisdictions come out with in terms of what they want to implement and how competitive those projects are. If we're undersubscribed in one of the categories, we can move that funding to another one. This is just what we're starting out with. But if we get 30 million, well, let's say we get 28 million in capital, and we only get 5 million in planning, or 3 million in planning, we can move those funds back and forth.
Okay.
So we have 35 million total, and this is just what we're suggesting based on feedback that we've received from the jurisdictions.
Got it. One more question, sorry. Regarding like applying for these projects, would it be like, how does that work, I guess? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So we will release the call for projects, but again, the only primary applicants need to be the local jurisdictions. So you guys would need to partner with the local jurisdiction on the project. They would need to submit and be in charge of the grant with SANDAG. We will release the call for projects. I believe I said in November. That's what we're shooting for after we get board approval. We normally then afterwards will hold like an application workshop for all of the jurisdictions. And then they have 90 days to submit their application. And then if they need any sort of technical assistance or one-on-one consultation, we will open that up to them as well.
Thank you. Kim.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. Can you elaborate on the reasoning behind removing the geographic component of the criteria?
Yeah, so we used to have smart growth opportunity areas, and those were different from what we were considering smart growth areas based on the 2021 regional plan, where we've moved to mobility hubs. So there wasn't really overlap in some areas of what were previously identified as smart growth opportunity areas to what we are now considering smart growth areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that does make sense. I think maybe this is just a knee-jerk reaction being here on this working group, but I just want to make sure that the communities that we all serve aren't then going to be, I don't want to say this. I understand that the idea is to get smart growth throughout the whole county, but we're here to advocate for the communities that generally get overlooked. So how do we make sure that they don't fall off the radar?
So while we've
Yeah.
removed that, really what we've done is we've just opened it up. There were some jurisdictions who don't have mobility hubs.
Okay.
So in order to kind of allow everybody to apply for this program, we've removed that as an application criteria, but you still get points for being in a TPA and mobility hub. So you can still apply, but you're sort of at a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of you have to have a more competitive project because you're not in an area you're not in a TPA or a mobility hub.
Okay, that makes sense then. Thank you for that. So where does that fall then into the, if you don't
That
mind
was
going-
relationship to regional transit.
relationship to regional transit?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And then my second question is just about community engagement as a criteria. Can you just elaborate on how that will be graded within that? Because I think that's fantastic, obviously, that's a component.
So we are in the process. This is kind of like the first step is we do kind of the higher level and then we dig in a little bit deeper. So if you have any feedback on how you would, we're thinking maybe has demonstrated active community engagement. We're still working through that. That's kind of why we're here, is to get your feedback on, do you have suggestions on what would make that more impactful?
Okay, I'm going to think about that while my colleagues ask questions, and I'll get back to you. Cool. Thank you for that.
I think I saw Rosa. Next.
Hi, thank you for sharing. Well, on that component, I feel like if it's a community-led project, then maybe that should be marked more points. I don't think it's just like you check the box and engage communities, you got your surveys. It's like if it was driven by community, I would count that as higher. But my question specifically was on the housing equity component for board policy 33. What does that look like in practice, or why would that be like 12.5 points compared to the 5 points on the equity and benefits for disadvantaged communities?
So our board policy 33 requires all competitive funding programs to the local jurisdictions allocate 25% of the total points towards this board policy. This board policy right now is pro-housing and housing equity. That is something that's in board policy. So the other things within this program, we can kind of change and make adjustments. That is set in stone. So what board policy 33 is right now, or pro-housing policies making up half of that, so 12.5, and housing equity making up the other. And those are policies that the jurisdictions have in place that promote affirmatively furthering fair housing. So we have a list, and it's, so like they've an adopted inclusionary housing ordinance, rent stabilization policies, anti-displacement policies, strategies or funds to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing, programs that are intended to, sorry, this one's really long, that are intended to result in increased investment in lower opportunity areas. So there's a bunch of different things, and I can provide this list to you, but that's just board policy 33 is something that our board passed, and it's part of our competitive grant programs.
Thank you.
I think Lisa, and then Marjana, and then Jovita.
Definitely agree with what Rosa mentioned on the community engagement, if it's community-led being higher points. And so if it's, if the lead applicant is the jurisdiction, and if it's the jurisdiction or the doing the engagement versus a partner CBO, I think that's an important distinction, and that if there's real, that's where I think you can see some real partnership with the CBO, because if they are helping to lead the engagement, and that is a little deeper on the partner side, that is rooted in the community, I think that that would make that more tangible community engagement.
Okay, so just to reiterate, so if a jurisdiction has a partnership with the CBO that's leading the engagement, you guys are saying that that should be worth more points than if it's just a jurisdiction doing it.
Mhm.
Sorry, thank you for the presentation. I guess I have a question about the board policy 33. Like, so there's a list of strategies that a local jurisdiction can use, and they're all equal. So if I was a jurisdiction, okay, because there's luxury, I could say that luxury apartments could come in and they have, 3 set-asides that are at 120% AMI versus a low-income housing, which is 190 units, right, that are all low income. I don't feel like those should be equally weighed. Maybe it's just me.
So we do have distinction in certain policies being worth like 5 points each or 2.5 points each. But if we want to discuss it like a little bit further in depth on kind of tweaks you guys would like to make, we can definitely talk through that.
Thank you for the presentation. I just want to piggyback on the community engagement. I've been to a couple of those meetings when they call, and the area, they only send out notices to the community, to the residents within 100. It's very low. And so I've gone to a couple of those meetings where they're looking for these kind of projects, and 2 or 3 people show up, and then they mark the box, and then they said they've done it, and there's nothing. So I really think that however they're going to notify the community and the residents and the business owners, it needs to be spread out miles, because it's within that area, but not just a very short, because to me, I think that's just a check off. They'll say, okay, I'll do it. We did it and it's done. So, but they need more community engagement. And then another thing I want to know is, how are the jurisdiction, how does the notice go out for everybody? How are they going to find out about these funds?
So currently the jurisdictions are pretty aware. We did a workshop with them back in November. We've gone to the Sustainable Communities and Mobility Working Group. We also have a technical assistance program through our Housing Acceleration Program, where they're aware of it. And then we also, this I'll refer to the grants team. I know we posted on BidNet, and I'm assuming that there's some sort of notification about that.
It's Planet Bid, right, Jenny? Oh, sorry. It's BidNet.
Yeah, so a notification will go out, but we have for months now. They know this is coming and they're really excited about it. So we've engaged with all of the jurisdictions thus far. So it's just a matter of getting them to apply and hoping that they have the resources and staff capacity.
Oftentimes, thank you for the presentation. Thank you. Oftentimes when we have projects that are going through the city, they will notify me, but just like she said, days before the event happens, and then there's no language accommodations, and then notices do not go out in languages that are in the community. So making sure that they're reaching out to the entire community. So if they highlight that, that should be something that they get extra points for, because it's so rarely done.
I would encourage you to look internally at what was done with the next generation rapid route subcontracts that were done 2 years ago and implemented last year here through SANDAG. Our organization at Bayside was subcontracted through HNTB, which was contracted from SANDAG to help do the community engagement in Linda Vista. And I think the way that HNTB, they were awarded the contract, so obviously they scored well on the criteria. And I think the way that they were able to work with us and work with two other agencies here, Chula Vista, oh, they're not here. Chula Vista. Yeah, Chula Vista. No, I'm sorry, City Heights CDC, and then somebody up in North County. The way that we were all able to work together to do the community engagement component, I thought was a very efficient way to do it. And clearly they scored well enough to be awarded the contract. So I would maybe just look at what the criteria was in that one, because it was contracting agencies like ours here at the table, but then it was done in a really systematic way of first we brought on board like an advisory group. So there were like 8 to 10 community members who helped us lead the project, the outreach. And then we did also broader community engagement efforts, like just general community meetings. But then we also engaged the smaller working group. So it was a really, I thought, efficient way of getting community feedback over the year project. So that would be one suggestion. And then one other thought on community engagement. We were contracted in the past couple of years to do outreach with the city of San Diego, and we were told we couldn't engage the planning groups because if we engaged one planning group, we had to engage all the planning groups. And I thought that was a terrible policy, and maybe that lies within the city of San Diego to change the policy, but we were effectively eliminating a core group of community members who do work on land use policy. And I thought it undermined the exact intention of the grant. So I think if we're able to do community engagement through civic bodies, that's a really important way to engage a different group of stakeholders, in addition to local residents who have often no connection with civic bodies. So I would just encourage maybe the inclusion of both levels. Thank you.
Any other member comments, questions? Okay. Do we have any public comments on this item, Tessa?
Thank you. There are no public comments.
Okay. Thank you, Stacy and Goldie. And last but not least, I know we have a lot of presentations today. Our final presentation, for the final presentation, we're going to hear an update on the Reconnecting Communities Studies data analysis tasks that several folks from our team are going to share with us today. I feel like I've been messing up everybody's names, but I'm going to try not to today. Lizzie Havey, Leong Tien, Sadra Sharifi, Emmanuel Lukban. Did I get everyone's name right? Kind of, sort of. Thanks. Okay, I'll pass it off to you.
Great. Thank you, Paula. Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Lizzie Havey. I'm Associate Regional Planner on the Sustainable Communities team, and I'll let Leong and his team introduce themselves briefly.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Liang Tian, and Principal Data Scientist at SANDAG.
Hello, my name is Emmanuel Lukban, Associate Data Scientist under Leong's team.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sadra Sharifi, Associate Data Scientist.
Great. So again, we're coming back to this group to talk about the Regional Reconnecting Community Study. We were asked to come back and speak a bit to the data sources we'll be using for the study. So that'll be the main topic today, but I do want to provide some context information again about this study. What is reconnecting communities? Generally speaking, we know that where government agencies planned and constructed highways has and still impacts communities today. Looking back, construction of transportation infrastructure such as highways and freeways at times harmed existing communities, displacing residents and local businesses and creating barriers by physically dividing once fluid neighborhoods. Again, I want to reference a report from the Department of Transportation that highlighted that highway routes were chosen where land costs were the lowest or where political resistance was the weakest, cutting through low income and communities of color more often than not. Today, reconnecting communities is an effort to restore connections and invest in neighborhoods. We see this in new federal and state grant opportunities.
And understanding now what is reconnecting communities, I want to talk briefly about what the study is and what it is not. So as you can see on the screen, we have a little bit there. So what it is a region-wide study to understand where transportation infrastructure, inclusive to rail and highways, has created barriers and negative impacts on communities. The study aims to define, identify, and prioritize solutions that will better reconnect communities. So what our study is not. This is one of several efforts under the umbrella of reconnecting communities and is not project specific. You may have heard SANDAG has been recently awarded funds for other reconnecting community type projects, but this study is helping us understand regionally where communities are most impacted and prioritizing solutions and project types where it is most needed. The study is not focused on one type of project because we need to identify a multitude of solutions with varying costs to prioritize fostering connections and feasibility of project implementation. So again, I want to go over the task briefly of the study. We are currently working on task 1, our data science aspect. The study is a joint effort between our data science department and the regional planning department. Our data science department is helping to lead this first task, and we're here today to provide a second update on the different data sources we are proposing for the analysis. Overall, the goals of this task is to define disconnected communities, establish quantifiable metrics to understand harmful transportation infrastructure, and identify corresponding data elements to be used in the analysis. We then hope to use this as impartial processes as possible to analyze and derive clustered communities of concern where we see the most impacts based on innovative data techniques that use a multitude of data sources. With your input, we have a final definition of disconnected community. And again, this definition is specific to our first task. We know many neighborhoods are connected in shared history, experience, and space, but for the purpose of the study, it's helpful to provide parameters to identify communities that have been and continue to be negatively impacted by transportation infrastructure. To help us understand what is a connected community, we want to understand what is a disconnected community. Some things we heard from you last time that we incorporated into this definition includes walkability, health impacts relating to pollution exposure, specific retail related comments such as access to grocery stores, and historical disinvestment. With these comments, we were able to create the final definition on the screen here, inclusive to more detail and nuance with each highlighted word in purple. Those highlighted words demonstrate the different elements of the definition that our data science team will talk about today. So just to read out loud again, the final definition, low-income communities that were physically separated and or displaced by transportation infrastructure, such as highways and railways that created barriers to access and opportunities such as work, education, open spaces, medical services, and retail, further burdened by safety, health, and mobility impacts and historical disinvestment. Another document we've been working on in tandem to identifying data sources includes our literature review. This helps inform potential data sources and additionally informs us on considerations from academic research and other reconnecting communities type projects. We're highlighting 2 sections of the literature review here, negative impacts of highways on communities and strategies for reconnecting communities. This helps us gain insight now for this task and future tasks of the study too. So some current study area considerations kind of early on in the study, as we start to look more into the region-wide analysis that we'll be doing. The transportation infrastructure included in the analysis will include highways, inclusive to state routes, as well as railways throughout the region. We know proximity to this transportation infrastructure impacts communities in terms of health outcomes, safety, and a number of other factors. Therefore, for the purpose of the study, we will use an approximate 1/2 mile buffer from the transportation infrastructure for the analysis using corresponding underlying geographic boundaries. We've determined census block groups would be the best appropriate geographic boundary for the purpose of the study and the potential data sources as available. So as we prepare for the analysis and understanding what data sources to use, we need to be mindful of some of our limitations of the study, including availability of data as well as budget. Now I'll pass the mic, so to speak, to Leong to talk more about the potential data sources.
All right, thank you, Lizzie. And we are so excited to be here working with regional planning team on this collaborative effort So I'm super excited to be here. And I also want to thank all of you, member of this working group, because back in April, I think, right, and you provide a lot of input in terms of what kind of elements we should be considering for this study. So actually we took that and we actually did a lot of research, very extensive. So today we're going to present the data sources relevant for this project based on your input back in April. And then before we start discussing data sources, we also would like to take a few minutes just talking about some of the key consideration factors goes into this analysis. As Lisa mentioned earlier, because of the kind of project timeline and also the budget, data availability definitely is one of the most critical factors we have to be keep in mind, right? So we are heavily leveraging publicly available data, and also we're also leveraging a lot of SANDAG already licensed third-party data. And then in addition, we also kind of take advantage of those SANDAG earlier research studies, especially from planning team, and then with the relevant topic, and to supplement our research study. And then in terms of the vintage, right, obviously we're trying to leverage most of recent data whenever it's available. And also we can capture the most current situation and also the post-COVID behavior as well. For the geography levels, Lisa mentioned a little bit earlier as well, right? We want to make sure we have a commonly used geography levels, right, for the study for different reasons. One is we want to make sure we have granular enough so we can capture a lot of, details, right, for each communities. Number two is which allows us to enable basically on top of each other different layers of data using the very commonly used geographies. And for that reasons, we're going to use census block group for this study as a building block. And then the other thing I want to mention is as a best practice, SANDAG actually organized quite a lot of those peer review process meetings in the past, and just making sure we are getting input from subject matter experts internally and sometimes externally as well. And then for this study, we also actually conducted a peer review process back in May and including internal subject matter experts on the data sources. So a lot of stuff we are going to present today has gone over a lot of the refinement based on input from all of you and also the internal subject matter expert. Right. Thank you, Lizzie. And Lizzie mentioned earlier, so the proposed data sources, we are going to organize into a different key elements, which a lot of them coming from you brought up from last time's working group sessions. And then also based on the finalized definition of the disconnect communities, right? So including accessibility to different fundamental functions, and also the social equity, health impact, safety, and others as well. And then, so in the next just 3 slides, we are going to presenting those proposed data sources by those categories. And then all of those information is also available on the report in the attachment of the agenda materials. So let's start with accessibility, right? So the fundamental idea here, we're trying to measure the proximity, right, from community members and kind of get access to those functional, essential functions, including work, education, and all of those, right? So there are obviously 2 different data elements we will be using throughout this analysis. One of them is the highway and rail network, right? Because we're trying to focus on the impact, a negative impact based on those highway and rail networks, right? So we're going to using that highway and rail network from CENGIS, which is San Diego Geographic Information Source and data layers. And then the other source we're going to be using is the SANDAG license, the third-party data, which actually provide a lot of movement patterns around those broad groups within the San Diego region. So those 2 are going to be used throughout this analysis. And in particular, for access to work, we're going to use in the California State Employment Development Department data, which captures all the categories of employment locations in San Diego. And then again, we're going to aggregate those into block group levels so we can measure the movement around those areas, right? And then for accessibility to education, we're going to use the SANDAG school and college inventories from 2022, which including elementary, middle school, high school, all the way to college as well. So capture all the college education institutions in the San Diego region. For retail, we hear a lot of your input from last time around. We're going to focus more on those essential functions, such as just grocery shoppings and pharmacies. And then those are kind of essential activities for all the community members in this study. For medical services, the data source we identified are coming from California Health and Human Services Agency, which they publish data including all the medical facilities across the California. And then we're going to take the San Diego part of that, which including hospitals, clinics, and also long-term care facilities as well. And then for the open space, so this one, we're going to combining the SANDAG parks layer, and then together with the SANDAG land use and dwelling unit to enable us to kind of laser focus on those open space, such as beach, parks, lakes, lagoons, all of those in the region. And then we are also trying to layer additional factors, right, for each community, measuring different aspects. Social equity, definitely one of the important ones. And then for this category, we're going to consider two different measures. One of them is low income and disadvantaged communities. For this one, we're going to use the SANDAG 2022 population and housing estimates. And then the calculation logic going to be consistent with the logic we will be using for our SANDAG 2025 regional plan. And then the other one, historic disinvestment. Again, this is also coming from all of you from last time's meeting. And the data source we identify right now is from the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and then which actually outline a pockets of area in San Diego, which was negatively impacted by the redlining back in 1930s. And this is kind of also a little bit complicated because a lot of areas in San Diego was developed after 1930s, right? So we are also actively looking for additional data, maybe can bring us maybe a little bit more current information on that as well in regarding to this historic disinvestment. The other aspects we're also looking for, obviously, safety impacts, right? So for this one, as we mentioned earlier, we're trying to leverage the other studies from the planning team. So SANDAG Vision Zero Action Plan is also ongoing as we speak, and we are actually taking the finalized data layers from this study, especially for those transportation-related fatalities and crash data involving pedestrians and cyclists around the highway proximity. We're going to take those and use as input for this study, right? Just making sure we can cover the safety conditions for each communities there. And then for mobility, definitely is a big thing, big factor for the study. Two things here. One is walkability, right? So for this one, we're going to take in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. They actually publish a national walkability index. Our team actually going to take some subcomponents from that walkability index, especially for the for example, the proximity to the transit stops, and also how many intersections within a block on the street. We take that and customize and come up with our own kind of index to measure the conditions of how easy it is for our community members to walk right in this each neighborhood. And then the other one is very creative. The team came up with this idea is the car trips of short distance. The rationale behind is for whatever reason, even though the direct distance is really short, but community members couldn't use any active transportation such as walk or bike. They have to drive around for longer distance. So the reason behind probably has to be because of the transportation network becomes a barrier in this case. Right, so we're going to take those two factors together to measure the mobility impact for this study. And then lastly, on the environmental health impacts, for this one, we're going to use in the US EPA environmental justice screening tools, which actually including a suite of factors in this measure the air pollution and also air-induced health risk as well. Some examples including the PM 2.5 is particularly to matter, and also the ozone levels for the region, and also the cancer risk from the air toxic materials and prevalence of asthma. So we're going to take all of those data into a composite score and to measure the overall environmental health impact for this study. And then, so again, we covered a lot of different aspects based on the definition, and as a next step, we're going to actually develop all the metrics in more details, and then we overlaid all of those in a geospatial lens perspective. And then after that, the team will be developing a lot of analytics techniques around those areas and using clustering methodologies really to help us rank ordering those areas which are highly impacted, negatively impacted by this, the highway infrastructures. And yeah, and also we're going to use, Lisa mentioned earlier, going to use pure data driven and also the really objective matter for this study as well. And again, we're going to bring those methodology review to this team in the future meetings. We're going to turn it over to Lizzie to close up.
Great. Yes, this is a true collaboration between regional planning and data science. And some of the next steps is identifying the most highly impacted communities. A lot of these things that are coming out of the analysis, we do want to ground truth with you all and work with the community. So we'll be doing outreach as well as some of the next steps you see, existing conditions, identifying implementation strategies and solutions within some prioritized impacted communities, and then drafting and finalizing the final report. With that, we'd like to welcome any comments, suggestions, feedback from the group, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lizzie and Leon. Jennifer?
Thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering, for access or accessibility to medical services, does that also include like emergency medical services coming to residents? And then also, what about fire services? Because I think that too has been impacted by highway and other transportation services.
So for accessibility of medical services, so we're using the California Health and Human Services. I think it's the current facilities data set. So it includes what we're looking at are hospitals, long-term medical care, and clinics. So it's basically the replicate data that we're using to kind of identify the trips to those locations are mostly for what they refer to as, I think they refer to as maintenance trips. So those are going to be like kind of scheduled medical appointments, not really emergency type of trips.
Yeah, thank you, Emmanuel. I think we can look into more about the data from California Health and Human Services. But right now, I think we're only including hospital, long-term care, and also major clinics. We can take another look to see if they have some emergency care facility in that data.
We started to have that conversation with some experts in that field, and we were struggling to find a readily available data source. But yeah, that's something that we were considering and we want to further look into as well.
Lots of great data science. 2 quick questions. What's the expected completion date for the report?
We expect the whole study to be wrapped up by December 2025 approximately.
Excellent, thank you. And I looked at data sources, I'm just not as familiar. Do these include walkability and bikeability?
Walkability, yes, we have a very specific score or I guess category.
Right.
Is there anything regarding bikeability?
I don't think so for now, but we can definitely look into it. And the reason for that is we take that national walkability index from EPA. And then I think there's 4 subcomponents to it, right? And then basically one is the proximity to transit stop, right? The other one is that's included basically. And then the other one is the how many intersections within a street on the block, right? And there's another one I think really relevant to the employment and population, something like that. So yeah, I think we can take another look on that to decide if we can also bring in something relevant to the bikeability.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, then, you know, as the social equity group, we promote different modes of transportation, right? Especially public transit, and a lot of people in that last mile. Sometimes I'm a transit rider, it's like, oh, can I take the trolley there? I don't know, because it's like across the freeway, right? So identifying those areas for opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Other comments, questions from our members? Okay. Tessa, do we have?
Sorry, no, there are no public comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lizzie, Leong, and team. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there. We are a couple minutes, 1 minute past 11:30. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, July 25th at 9:30 a.m. And if there are no other comments, we are adjourned. Thanks.